Hello, I'm Timothy Perfect from 2 Software, and I want to talk to you a little bit about our new release of XCreds 2.0. It's a big release, and it adds in some features that folks have been waiting for, mainly that you can now log in on your Mac at the login window with your cloud password. So if you have an Azure account or a Google Cloud, Okta, something like that, you can now use the macOS login window or the login window to log into those cloud services. And we also added a whole slew of new preferences to be able to customize that experience, as well as creation of the home directory and the user account on first login. So if you have a new Mac that's never been logged into, but you've installed XCreds and it's been configured via profile from your MDM, the user logs in for the first time using their cloud credentials, and it automatically keeps them in sync with their local account, and it logs them in, creates the home directory, creates the user account, and they're off and ready to go from the moment they log in. So it's a pretty slick first experience. So let me go ahead and show you how this all works. All right, so I have a Mac here that's just been set up. I'm logged in as the TC admin account, which is our local admin account, which is the only user account on this machine. And that's going to be important in a bit, but I'll show you right now. We only have this one user on the machine, which is the local admin. I'm just installing XCreds, so I'll go ahead and double click on it and install it. And of course, you would normally install this through your MDM or some other, whatever way, Monkey or whatever, which you do package management. So I installed that, and what that does is it installs the XCreds application right there. But it's not configured yet. We offer a sample configuration, and I'll show you a little bit later how to actually create your own. But for this one, the sample configuration is actually one that uses, that actually works in our setup. So let me double click on that. And normally you would, of course, push this out through your MDM, but for this example, I'm just going to manually install it, and then I have to go in and approve it. So let me approve this. Okay, so that's how we manually install it. Normally this is all set up in the MDM for you, but I just want to show how to manually configure it so we can see that. And then I'll log out. And the first thing you'll notice that when I log out is we don't see the macOS login window, but instead we see the XCreds login. And this one's set up for Azure, so it'll show you the Azure login. And you notice there was no user account on this machine except for TC admin. So I'll go ahead and sign in. They have an account called Barney, and as an Azure Active Directory, I'll sign in. One thing you'll notice is I did customize the background, so when it recognized that it was our tenant for 2 Canoes, it changed the background, so it's a great visualization that you know that you're logging into the correct one. And then I'll put in my password. And it takes a little bit of time for the first time because it has to create the user account, it has to create the home directory, and get everything set up for that first login experience. But then once that completes, the user just goes through the initial setup. And it's just like you would do when you're going through Setup Assistant and creating a new user account. All right, I'll step through these. All right, so now I'm at the desktop, and this user is now logged in at Barney, this Barney account from Azure. And if I look and actually see inside these users and groups, I will see that I have the Barney user, and my TC admin is still in the account as well. And I'll show you a little bit about how we can use the local admin later on. The other thing is, if we now launch the XCreds app, and you can of course configure this to automatically launch from your MDM, you'll see that it has a little green dot. And that green dot means that the credentials have been synchronized, and it's actually monitoring to make sure there are no changes to your cloud password. So now if we were to go and change our password on Azure, it would prompt you to relog back in on the Mac to make sure those passwords stay in sync. And in fact, if we look in the keychain, you can see that in the login keychain, we have 4 credentials, and these are the tokens that are associated with that cloud credentials or OIDC. So that's a great indication everything's working fine. So let me go ahead and log out and talk a little bit about the login window. So you can see here that we have some buttons on the bottom, and be aware that you could have an initial setup. This could be set up by somebody that's at a coffee shop or at their home that doesn't have Ethernet, and so they don't necessarily have it configured to be on a network. And since you're logging in with your cloud credentials, you would need to be on a network. So that's why we have this Configure Wi-Fi button. And if you click on the Configure Wi-Fi, it'll scan the local area for, so it will scan for Wi-Fi SSIDs, and then give ability to select which Wi-Fi network you want. I'm currently connected to the Luna 5, so it selected that already. And if I change it to a different one, it would prompt me for the username and password, or just the password in this case, because it's WPA2. So I don't need to do that. I'll hit X. The next button is shutdown and restart. Those do exactly what you expect, just like in the regular macOS login window. Then we have this really cool button, the Mac Login Window button. And what this does, and I'll select that, it goes and it actually switches over to the standard macOS login window. And this is a great way to be able to do, if you're offline, getting onto an airplane, if you want to get to the local account to do maintenance, if you can't log in for some reason with your cloud username and password, you can still do a local authentication. And you can see that we have this overlay that says iCloud, or that has cloud login. So I'll select cloud login, and what it does, it'll switch back to the XCreds login window and allow you to go ahead and authenticate back to your with your cloud credentials. So it's a great way to be able to switch between the two, especially if you have offline access, or you need to go in and just do maintenance on it, and you don't know that user account, or you don't want to log in with those cloud credentials. So the actual UI in XCreds is very customizable with preferences, and so you can change what buttons are shown and which ones aren't. But I turn them all on for this demo so you can see this. We also have a refresh button in case for some reason this Microsoft or the cloud provider's webpage doesn't show. We just hit refresh and it reloads that again. So it's a great way to be able to show that view again if something were to happen. So it should cover all the use cases. For the next piece of this, I'm going to go and talk a little bit about the preferences that are available for XCreds. So I'll do a Mac login, and I'll actually log in as the local admin because I have it set up for there. So I'll go ahead and just choose local admin. And it'll put me right back into where I was when I started. And so this profile that we have, if we go ahead and we open this with text edit, you can see there's a whole bunch of keys, or this one actually has the very minimum one, but we have the keys to be able to configure XCred to be able to log in at the login window to be able to authenticate the user. And you of course could edit our sample mobile config, and all on the website we define what all the keys are. But there's an easier way to do it. There's a wonderful app called Profile Creator that's available on GitHub. So if you just go on GitHub and search for Profile Creator, and it allows you to create a profile and have all the settings. And it shows you what all the settings are available. So I'll hit plus and do a new one, and I'll just call it XCreds in a description. I'll just call this XCreds as well. And we do want to make sure that we choose it as a system level payload scope, right? So it's all users on the system, and that'll affect the login window. So you got to make sure you do that. If it's not working at the login window, it's very possible you're not doing it as system. And then we can go in and under applications, if you've installed the, if either we've submitted this to the project, so it should be populating by default. It hasn't been accepted yet, but hopefully it will soon. And if you don't have, you don't see this, you can go and turn on in the preferences. You can go to advanced and turn on the developer menu. And then under developer, you do show payload manifest in Finder. And then you can see, if I go up one level, it's easier to see, that you'll have manage preferences Apple, manage preferences applications. And application is the one that we want to put it into. And I downloaded this from our GitHub repository. It's one of the 3 files. This is the package installer, the mobile config, and then there's this manifest. And all I did was take this manifest, I dragged it in, and I dropped it here. And I already had it in there, so I won't do it again. But that actually gives us all these options in XCreds. And then once you put it in there, you just do reload payload manifest, and then you'll see that's available, and all the different keys are available for you to use. So it's a great way to set it up. So the first thing you do is do the discovery URL. The discovery URL is it depends on what your tenant is for your cloud provider, but this should be given to you as basically the discovery URL as part of the OIDC. And there's also a client ID. And actually, I'll just use the one. I'll open this back up with TextEdit. And I should have client ID is right here. And of course, you would get that from whoever your provider is to be able to see, or whoever is administering your Azure or cloud provider, Google credentials, and what your client ID is, so you can put this in. And those are the only two keys that are required. Other than that, everything will work and allow you to modify the default behavior. But I want to go through the different keys and talk to you a little bit about that, what each one does. And we do have documentation on each one of these on our website. In fact, I've updated this profile so it will have a link to the documentation as well in it. So by the time you'll see this video, it'll actually have a link to that, which is great. So the first one is local username. So local username is, if I sign in as Barney, but if Barney was my online persona and I had a Fred user that was actually my local account, I could tie those together. Normally it'll just take what's the beginning in your email and use that as the local account. So if you already have a pre-created local account and you want to tie those together, you can specify the local username in the preferences. Client secret is not something that is required by all OIDC providers, but if you do have a requirement for that, you can hit plus and add the OIDC client secret. Scopes isn't something that you can add in. If you don't provide it, this is what it adds in by default: profile, OpenID, and offline access. And that really means that once we do that authentication in the cloud, what information is sent back. And so profile means it sends some profile related to my user account. It sends back the information about my OpenID user account. And then offline access, for Azure, it means that it'll send a token that allows you to do refresh. So that was really important to be able to make sure that your password hasn't changed. You have to add offline access. And this is an OIDC scope, and but it doesn't work in Google Cloud. Google Cloud, they require different preference. So for Google, you would remove this offline access and you do a different preference, which we'll get to in a second. The password change rate is basically the number of times, how often does it check to see. It basically takes your OIDC token, sees that if it's still valid. If it's not valid, that triggers a password login, and the user will be prompted for that and they'll log in. Normally, you'd only want to do that at most once an hour. By default, it's every 3 hours. The redirect URI, this is normally after you're finished Normally, after you finish a authentication, it'll redirect to another website that you're trying to authenticate to. But since we're at the login window, we actually need to detect that our login is finished. So it doesn't really matter what you put here. We recommend XCreds://auth/, and then you put that into the redirect URI, allowed redirect URIs in the application and Azure. So those two, doesn't really matter what they are, but they have to match. And make sure you put the trailing slash in both, or don't put it in both, but they do have to match. So basically it has to be the same redirect URI. In Google Cloud, they have to be HTTPS. So you'd have to do, and we usually recommend HTTPS:// localhost 127.0.0.1/XCreds. And that's in the documentation, but you just need to have it the same in both places. The next one is verify cloud password. So that's so before the keychain is changed, the password is updated, it'll prompt you to be able to make sure. So this makes sure that this is great for testing, to make sure that the value you're changing, the local keychain and the local username or the local password, is exactly what you expect. So it's just a prompt for an extra check. We can show the version and build number on the lower left corner XCreds. That's that iCloud login, or return to XCreds is what we call it. It just basically says cloud login, and you can show the build number as well. So the next one is show support status message. So XCreds is an open source project, but we do sell support and we do have a donations page. So by default, we have a message on the login window reminding you to buy support because it supports the project and also gets you support. You get escalated priority bug fixes and feature requests, as well as the good feeling you get from supporting a project with software you're using. So it's a great way to do it. If you purchase support, you can go ahead and remove that status message. You don't have to have purchase support to remove that, but you should. You should. The next one is the Show Wi-Fi, Configure Wi-Fi button. We had the Wi-Fi button on the screen. If you don't want to give the users that option, you can remove that option. By default, you can see it's checked. The Show Mac Login Window, if you want to remove the ability to do offline authentication, then you can remove that button as well. Request Google Refresh Token. That's that offline access that's up here. We had before under Scopes offline access. So if you are using Google Cloud to authenticate, you would add the scopes in, remove offline access, and then add this preference for request Google Refresh Token. You'll still be able to log in, but it won't be able to do that, see if the password's been changed. Show debug messages, that just adds notifications, so it's a great way to troubleshoot what's going on. It's mainly more of a developer setting, but it's fun to put in there if you want to. The quit menu, the show quit menu is in the app itself. When you're running in user space, you can prevent the user from actually quitting it, so it'll stay running and they won't accidentally quit it. Show preferences and startup is a key to be able to show. If you first launch the app and you haven't had preferences defined, it'll show those preferences. By default, it doesn't do that. So that option was kind of an option we had at the beginning. We've kind of moved away from that, where it's just configured by the configuration profile. Enable full disk encryption. So one of the things they can do after you log in, when it's creating the home directory on that initial login, we can enable full disk encryption. We can also have options to save the personal recovery key. It saves it to a location which can be specified under the FDE recovery key path, which then can be picked up by your MDM to be able to have that key. And of course, that's sensitive information, so you want to get it off and wipe it. By default, I believe it's stored in /temp, so it'll be removed on first reboot, but you want to be able to remove that. Other options, the enable FDE key rekey, which means it rotates the personal recovery key, which is an option at login. There's another UI show about menu. So in the XCreds menu, there's an about menu to learn about XCreds. You can remove that. Password change URL for menu. So if you have a recommendation in your organization to change the password every certain number of days, you can actually in your Mac go up under the XCreds menu and choose the change password, or whatever URL you put in here will then go to, and they can change their password. So it's a great way to give the users an easy route to your change password website. And then also, did you notice when we were logging in, it took a little bit of time while it was doing the user creation account? We can change the background image URL. By default, it's the Monterey graphic. You can change that to something more branded to your organization. But that one is just kind of while the user's waiting to be able to bask in the glow of your school colors or your corporate logo. You might want to put up some compliance training so they can read through it in that 30 seconds. But either way, it's a graphics that allows you to show what you're able to do. It's a graphic you can put up while you're waiting. So once you've actually created this, let me go ahead and add this in, and you can just save it and then export it. And then when that's done, it's basically what I do here on the desktop. It is important that you have the scope be system. And so you want to make sure that's system-wide, otherwise the login window won't work at all. So that's an important piece to make sure that you do. So let me switch back. So thanks for joining me on learning a lot more about what XCreds 2 is. It's available now on GitHub and through our product page. As I mentioned before, there is options to buy support and also to donate to the project. So if you find that this is valuable to you or your organization, there are no per license fees. There are no requirements to download the software, no license key, but we do request that you do support the project. And XCreds 2 is full of features that folks have really been asking for, which is that logging in at the login window, on the macOS login window, and keeping that password up to date so you reduce those help desk calls. So it's a great way to be able to get to leverage your cloud providers a login experience, but also keep the ability to do offline access and be able to have the user be able to configure Wi-Fi and those kind of things as they need to get available. And as you saw, we try to make it as easy as possible and provide as much documentation as possible for you to be able to get up and running very quickly. That being said, you can buy support, and it'll be me or one of my staff will be able to get on a call with you and be able to explain and listen to how you're setting up and how you can go ahead and deploy it and get you up and running as successfully and as quickly as possible. So please visit us at twocanoes.com for more information about XCreds, or visit the project on GitHub. I think it's github.com/twocanoes/XCreds. And one of the important pieces, please join us in the Mac Admin Slack channel under XCreds. So we have a channel there that is pretty active about folks using XCreds and how they're using it. And it's a great place. That's where most of the time where I hang out and be able to answer questions and get feedback from folks. So please join us there. And if you don't know about that, just go to macadmins.org and you can sign up there for free. So it's a great way to be able to get information. So again, thanks for watching. I'm Tim Perfect for Two Canoes Software, and I really appreciate your time and have a great day.